you go back in time. So if I go back to the little holler I grew up on, there's no cell phone service. My parents do not have internet. They don't have TV. So it feels like you're going back in time. And I think the high schools and stuff like that reflect that community. And I know that my perspective is very different than yours. And I went to school, I graduated like in 2007, 2008, somewhere around there. I don't remember. But it's one of those things that's how it was when I went to school. So I did base it on that experience. Like if a boy was wearing makeup, they were automatically an outcast. We had maybe one or two boys in my entire school that would be daring enough to come to school wearing black eyeliner, never lipstick. And hopefully it is different now. I have not been to my high school. I do not have children, so I can't say one way or another, but I know that rural communities definitely are behind on a lot of the trends and the progressiveness. I feel like I grew up in the 80s in a lot of ways because of the fact that I grew up in a community that was just so far behind on technology, on style, fashion choices, all of it.
Right. Well, in book one, you do mention that there is a woman working in the office who looked like she just stepped out of 1980 something. I was waiting for that description of her outfit. I didn't quite get that description.
We could both, we could.
The lipstick on her teeth.
I was hoping for that description, like, oh, I can't wait to see what she's wearing. But anyway.
Yeah, Perry and I both graduated in the 80s. So.
One of my alpha readers always tells me I need to be more descriptive in what they're wearing, and I just am like, that kind of sometimes will date a book, though, if you're not careful.
When I write my stories, I'm very descriptive about what they're wearing. But I was also a fashion merchandising major in college. So,
I don't know anything about fashion. You're lucky if I can get dressed in the mornings.
Okay. Speaking to the person who's wearing a T-shirt, a big braided T-shirt with pearls. I mean, and I'm wearing pearls.
I love it. I love it.
Anyway, I did work in the retail industry for a very long time, and I do want to say that. And back in the day when I was in high school and college, brand names and fashion and things like that were very important to me. I kind of think it still probably is a little bit. I love a good outfit, a good put together outfit. But I will say your books are very, very well written. They were very good as far as like just the wording is sometimes very poetic. It's almost literary to a point. And I found book 3 to be very fast paced and almost thriller in feel, because it was one of those where you were like, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
You know,
I should say, don't give too much away.
Your feet with, ooh, what is going to happen next? Are they going to escape? What is happening? You know, very tense, very emotional. But a lot of the book is very emotional. And the character of Harlan and Luca being the one who's from this kind of strict family. Well, his stepfather is the strict one. The stepfather is the one who's kind of like the harsh, cruel, almost just very belligerent in his attitude and very pious in his attitude. And it's very unappealing. You know, I think most people probably find that attitude, that arrogance and that, you know, very unappealing. So, you know, or I find that very unappealing. So, you know, he's questioning his faith. He's also questioning his sexuality. He doesn't understand it. And then he meets Harlan, who has had an experience or an unpleasant experience. And you find out, I think about that in book 3, maybe, where he talks about that, what happened to him several years earlier, which was very unfortunate, almost like a catfishing. Have you seen the show Catfish?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. And that's what it reminded me of. So, you know, Harlan is also kind of trying to say some things and kind of give his opinions to Luca about a lot of different things. And, there's all of these discussions about, God and the Bible and this and that and the other. And, so I had a little bit of, I'm reading it. And of course I'm reading it from, a standpoint of someone who's a believer. And so I'm reading and he's saying, well, Mary, when, she told Joseph about the angel coming to her, and then he probably didn't believe her. So, she just he just assumed that she made it up. And honestly, yeah. I think that the reaction that Joseph had was he didn't believe her, because he didn't. He makes the plan to divorce her quietly. And so when, God realizes what his plans are, an angel comes to him and says the exact same things that the angel told Mary, which is, this is how it's going to happen. You're going to name him Jesus. He's Mary, nothing has happened to Mary. This is all of the Holy Spirit. She's not been defiled in any way. This is all of God. And this is to, for the prophecy. He's going to be born in the town of David, and you will take Mary as your wife, and you'll name him Jesus, and he will save his people from his sins. But they don't get into all of that discussion. It just kind of... There's
too much to do.
Yeah.
Like, that was one thing that was really difficult for this book, is that it was towing the line of somewhat too much information, and I didn't want to make the discussions really drawn out. But I wanted to make them organic in a lot of ways. So it was a really hard thing to do, because I could have written like another 3 books if I wanted to make these theological discussions as detailed and as back and forth as they could be. But I just didn't think, I think that that would be kind of tedious for the reader, especially if they're not super interested in theology. So it was a very interesting line to toe. I do have a lot of people that will come into my direct messages and want to talk a little bit more about something that maybe Harlan and Luca had discussed in the book, and I have that discussion with them. And I've never told anyone, oh, you're wrong. Or sometimes I'm like, oh, that's a really good point. I don't know what to say to that. And it was one of those things that the theological discussions were a lot of fun to write, but I also didn't want to bore people. And that was my worry. Like the back and forth, they were already really long. I think the one in the chapter where they're at the park and they're with their friends, I think that one's like 6,000 to 7,000 words long. I know it probably doesn't seem that long when you're reading it, but I didn't want to bore people, and I didn't want to give them too much information and get really deep into theology like I could have. I just try to keep it interesting, factual, and also kind of surface level, because they are in high school, and they are having these really interesting, thought-provoking, deep discussions. But at the same time, I don't want people to get bored and feel like they're reading a textbook. And I think that was a really big back and forth that I had with it. Because I ended up, when I was editing it, I removed some of the wordiness in the discussions and some of the back and forth, because I just didn't want it to be boring.
Right. Okay. What I did feel, I felt a lot of heartache for Harlan.
Yeah.
I felt his pain a lot. I felt like there was, for me, I felt more for Harlan, and maybe because I kind of thought that Luca was kind of on the edge of like maybe not understanding a lot of things, and kind of like not really sure of himself in a lot of ways, whereas I kind of felt like Harlan might have been a little bit more sure of himself, but yet more heartbroken in a way.
Yes. Yeah. I agree with that, especially in the beginning. Before I broke Luca, Harlan was the broken one. And I wanted to show readers the difference in perspective and how someone was raised. So Luca was from a fairly wealthy family. He, had somewhat loving parents. And, he never wanted for anything really other than to like feel some sense of like individuality and independence. Whereas Harlan, he was he grew up very impoverished. He had a single mom. He had this thing that happened to him that you don't find out until book 3. So I really wanted to show the difference that perspectives can make. And Harlan is just a little sweetie baby pie. Like, I love him to death. They're both based on different pieces of me, but neither of them are fully me. But Harlan definitely is my baby. And I think that writing the books, I thought people would be more invested into Luca, because it kind of becomes his story, as much as I don't like saying that, because it's definitely both of their stories. But I think that, like, as I've heard feedback from readers, people have fallen in love with Harlan. And I get it, because I fell in love with both of them by the end, obviously, because they're my babies. But Harlan is just a little, you really feel for him, especially in the beginning, and you don't know exactly why he's so closed off and why he feels like he doesn't deserve attention or love.
Right. And one of the things in the book is there's a lot of safety and security, and that's very important, I think, to Harlan, is that things are safe and respectful and consequential. You know, I want to make sure that you're consenting. This is very important that we're both in agreement with what's happening between us. And so I noticed that was very important part of the book, part of the characters. And so I that's a good thing that I found that was in there. Even though the characters are older, I think they start out at 18.
They do.
High school, they turn 19. So they're already, I mean, even though they're children, they're adult children.
Yeah, they're adults.
Harlan is being very respectful in how he relates to the physical relationship that takes place. He wants to make sure that, there's an agreement there between them that this is okay. And I think that's important in the book. So do you want to speak on that, a little bit of the importance of that?
I'm big on consent in books anyway, like having a conversation about consent, because I think it's very important. And as someone who writes new adults, someone might be reading my books who may not be as sexually active or know a lot about sex sometimes. So I think I want my books to be somewhat educational in that way, and that they should be able to speak openly about consent and what they're comfortable doing. And with Harlan's character in specific, he had been betrayed so much with what happened in his past and then what continued to happen to him. He was really closed off, and I think it was important for him to know that Luca wanted it just as much as he did, especially after what Luca had gone through. Because Harlan knew from a intimate perspective of what it's like to have your humanity shredded from you in some ways brutally, and trying to get that back. So it was important, and Harlan really cared for Luca. He did from the beginning, even though he pretended he didn't. So I think consent was such a big part of that, because Harlan knew what it was like to not give consent to certain things. And I'm not saying there's any dubious consent in here or any non-con. But it's just one of those things that, like, Harlan knew what it was like to be hurt, and he would never want to hurt anybody else.
Right. Okay. And also there's a scene in book 4 that's very, very intense that takes place in the abandoned church where Harlan finds Luca there. Luca is really crying out to God, "Show yourself. I need to know. I can't live like this anymore." He's kind of at his wit's end with what's happening and emotionally kind of a wreck at that point. Harlan finds him because I guess he somehow noticed he ran in that direction and went and found him.
He followed him.
So Harlan shows up on the scene, and then there's this enormous emotional content that takes place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very intense with what
Yeah.
Harlan is saying, because he's literally kind of like trying to shake Luca into like, wake up from this, that I know that you've been in this conversion camp and it's ruined you and it's messed you up, and it's messed you up mentally, and it's messed you up physically and everything, but I'm here to tell you, you know, you can count on me, rely on me. But also I felt like Harlan was angry to the point where he's like, there is no God, there is no God, he's not here, he's not real, I'm the one that's real, this is real, what we have between us is real, our feelings for each other are real, we can taste it, we can feel it, we can see it, all of those kinds of things. So I again, I felt pain, because I felt like Harlan is heartbroken in a way.
Yeah.
It's like,
Oh, yeah.
you know, it's like
That, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, that to this day is like one of my favorite things I've ever written. It was so hard yet rewarding to write. And a part of it was because there was just so much build up and build up and build up, and you were just waiting for it. And I didn't want to like let people down. So that, like, as a writer, that was really hard. But I think it needed to happen. And Harlan was heartbroken. He was tired of, because at that point, Luca had said some not so nice things to him. He kept pushing him away, and Harlan kept trying. And it all came to a head to where Harlan was like, I can't keep going back and forth with you. I need to shake you out of it. So he did things that were somewhat shocking, that he might not have done otherwise, especially because Harlan, throughout the whole series, he never lost his temper. He never like got mad at Luca. He never got mad at what was going on. He usually if he was angry and emotional, he took it out on himself. So this scene was really important because Harlan it was like well known that he wasn't the type to show emotions in front of people. Even though he had like cried in front of Luca in the past, he never lost his temper. He always kept his cool and calm. And I think he needed to snap a little bit to get Luca to snap out of it. And like I said, that's one of my favorite scenes that I've ever written, because it's very emotional. I try to make it emotional at least.
Yeah.
And then what it leads to is, I kind of think, is a little shocking, which is I'm fine with.
Yeah, no, it's well, yeah.
Don't spoil it.
I'm trying not to.
Yeah, well,
Don't spoil
we
it.
don't want to give any spoilers out
No.
as to
Right.
what happens next, but the emotion that Harlan is showing in this moment in this abandoned church, where he's, you know, throwing his hands up, he's throwing the finger up, you know, at God, and saying, you know, you don't exist, and you know. But then he'll go back and say to Luca, but I'm not trying to convert you into being an atheist. I want you just to understand and see there might be some things that you need to think about or realize. And for me, I'm thinking, but about things like, well, you know, I understand that, you know, there's a lot of rules in the Old Testament, and I think that the rules in the Old Testament were a lot of times for their safety, or for their or for, you know, they had to cook their food a certain way, or they couldn't eat a certain food because of health reasons, or they had to make the water with wine because it killed the bacteria, and they had to, you know, make sure they were drinking something that was not going to hurt them. And God had all these rules about, you know, washing and cleaning so that they could be, you know, health-wise. It was for, you know, for their health and safety purposes, I think, a lot of the rules. But I also think when Jesus died, and the curtain, that really thick curtain that was torn from the top to the bottom, that allowed anybody to the throne of God from that point, was like saying, all those rules don't matter. Those things are in the past. What matters now is you have redemption. You have salvation. You have, you know, it's free gift. You know, God has provided the lamb, and you don't have to continue to bring the sacrifice to the temple anymore, continuously bringing a dove or a lamb or
Yeah.
a blood sacrifice.
Yeah.
God has taken care of this for you, and I've provided my son, and this is for you to accept. So I kind of feel like, okay, well, yeah, there were rules and there were things, that they could or couldn't do. And I think even to this day, some of the things that, Harlan is like saying is like, oh, well, it's wrong to divorce, or it's wrong to, and there was some weird thing about different fabrics being worn.
Yeah, there is. There's one like that. That's in the Old Testament. It's in I don't remember which book or chapter, but it's in the Old Testament.
And so, I'm thinking, well, working too much could be a problem if it affects your family in an unpleasant way. Or eating too much could be a health problem, or drinking too much can affect your life or your job or whatever. Doing too much of certain thing might be bad, but maybe a little bit of that in,
moderation,
in the right context, moderation isn't. So it's kind of like, there's those things where it almost seemed like, they were saying it has to be this way. It has to be this way. It can't.
Yeah.
And they weren't seeing they were seeing too much of the rules and all of that was just kind of always a problem. And it just seemed like, cut to the chase. It's really not about that. It's really not about that. It's really, just come to know. It's a relationship between you and, it's that one-on-one relationship between Jesus and you. It's you, and it has nothing to do with all this other stuff. And
some people aren't taught that. Some people are not taught that. They are not taught that it's a one-on-one relationship between you and Jesus or you and God. They are taught that they have to follow these rules in order to get into heaven. And they are taught that they are born sick with original sin. They are taught that because they are women, they are less than, and they're not allowed to speak in a church. And to say that they're not is wrong, because I was taught that. So Harlan, he had been so traumatized by religion at that point, and it was further becoming an issue in his life with Luca and what he went through, and now he lost someone that he really cared about because of religion. And then he just heard all of these horrific things that Luca had went through. And I think that it's perfectly human for him to snap and be like, there is no God. I'm tired of you, going through this with you. And we all say things in the heat of the moment that we might not necessarily regret or not necessarily don't mean, but that, we all say something in the heat of the moment that we might not think before we say, or say it as eloquently as we normally would if we weren't angry. And at the end, in like the last several chapters, Harlan did say, it's okay if you believe in God. And he didn't want him to necessarily give up his faith in completion. He wanted him to give up this ideation that being gay means that you are sick. And I have a lot of other side characters in there that do keep their faith throughout. There's Ezra. There is, Luca's mom. She still goes to church in the end. She goes on and off with her, the guy that she, ends up with. So there are countless characters that do continue with their faith. It's just I didn't feel that was Luca's path. And I went back and forth on that a lot, if I wanted him to continue to believe in God. But at the end of the day, I just felt that after everything he's gone through and everything that religion had put him through, and I'm not saying that all Christians, I'm saying that it was an organized religion that did this, that he wouldn't be able to continue his belief and still accept himself in a lot of ways. So that was a conscious decision on my part, because I think a lot of a conversation that's been happening a lot more in recent years is deconstruction and ex-evangelicalism and that religious trauma, and how people are starting to open up on how religion has traumatized them to the point where they realize that if there was a God and he was a good and loving God, then why did he let me go through this at the hands of people who supposedly worshiped him? So I think at the end of the day, it was a conscious decision to make Luca choose to believe in God. But he's still a good person. So even if he doesn't believe in God, does that mean he's going to go to hell just because he doesn't believe? Or he's still a really good person. He does everything he can for his sisters. He loves Harlan to death. He helped Asher. So I think it's just coming to terms with understanding that you don't need to believe in God to be a good person, and being a good person is not tied to your faith.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie? I think it came out recently. It's called Redeeming Love. It's based on a book by Francine Rivers. I just watched it on Peacock the other night, and her book is historical fiction, and it takes place during California during the gold rush, and it's about a prostitute who's in a brothel in this like small gold mining town, and then this farmer who lives outside of town who sees her walking, taking a walk, and he says, "Oh, who is that? She's absolutely gorgeous." And so, he finds out who she is and what she does, and he pays extra money just to go and talk to her, not to have sex with her. And she's very confused by this, because this is what she does, or she's, in this brothel. And apparently these gold miners are paying like for a lottery ticket so they can win a lottery to spend time with her. And so he's paying extra money to go and just have a conversation, and he wants to, but the whole thing is so good. The movie is so good, and it's based on this book, and I ordered the book after seeing the movie, but it's Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers, and I ordered the book after I watched it because it was just so good. But it was like this movie that seems to like capture like God's love and like how he reaches out and just kind of like shows I'm here for you. I'm trying to, I'm actively, reaching out. I'm actively, and it just kind of, it was just the way that, and it's a lot, of course, it's a movie that's got a lot of stuff. And it's kind of a dark movie. I don't know if it's rated R. It might be PG-13, but, and the actors, I know some of the actors are British and they do really good American accents. And it's really good. It's just a movie that really takes you to a lot of different places, and it's got some dark themes, but it's got I think just a very positive message on love and forgiveness and acceptance. And, no matter what you've done, you are lovable, you are loved, and accept, that's the kind of message that it portrays. And so I cried probably through most of the movie, but I really liked it. And so I was like, I need to get this book that this movie is based on. Apparently the book was written in the 90s and the movie was just made in 2020, I think.
I don't think I've heard of it. But yeah, I wanted my books to be, based on love and trust and self-acceptance in a lot of ways. I think you can find anecdotal evidence anywhere that God loves you, but I think you can find just as much evidence that God hates people. So I don't know if I necessarily think that, I like that God loves everybody, because there's a lot of starving people in this world, and I was one of them at one point. But the message in this book was more so learning your own strength and accepting yourself and learning to love yourself, and knowing that you aren't wrong just because you're gay. That's what I wanted people to take away from it. And I wanted people to take away that you do not choose your sexuality. And if it was a choice, people would probably choose not to do it because of the trauma that they've been through based on their sexuality and who they're attracted to. And it's completely not fair. But a lot of people who go through conversion therapy, straight camps, whatever you want to call it, they end up committing suicide because they just can't realign who they are and how they feel with what they were told, who they were told who they were and what they felt. And that's just the reality of it. So I think it's perfectly fair to say, yeah, there are loving Christians, and there are Christians who love and accept and, think that are very loving and believe in a loving God. But it's just as easy to find Christians that believe in a hateful God and that believe that gay people are wrong and they need to be punished and they need the gay beaten out of them. And you hear that a lot.
Okay, and that's real, and it's unfortunate. I just think it's something that certainly we need to bring out into the light, into to let people be aware of it. I think your books are very honest and real about the things that you've written about. I think that I mean, I think that there are circumstances that we don't understand. There's a lot of things that that are wrong in the world that I think it has more to do with the fact that we live just in a fallen world and things, and there's going to be sickness and illness. But I think that in heaven there isn't going to be sickness or illness or unhappiness or anything that's damaging or sad or destructive or anything that's flawed. I don't think any of that kind of thing is in heaven. I think it's only good, light, love, and I think time doesn't pass in heaven. I think it's always in the present. So I think that we live in kind of things that are going to be really awful and things that are sometimes really good. We have a mix of both here, a little bit of the bad but when we see the bad, we certainly appreciate the good because of the bad. What God can do when we allow him to, or whatever, to be appreciative of those sorts of things that, I can drive past a field of yellow flowers in a meadow and I know they're weeds, but they're absolutely gorgeous. And the way the sun glints down on them and the horses that are grazing in the field, I just look at that and I'm driving in the car and I'm like, it's breathtaking. And it takes me back and I'm like, oh, that is so beautiful. And I think to myself, it's a creation. It's, it's beautiful. It's, and I guess I feel like, some of the arguments that are made, God doesn't exist or whatever. And I think to myself, but there's a creation behind the clothes I'm wearing, a chair that I'm sitting in, desk that I'm at, the room, the house that I'm in. There's a creator behind all of these things. So I kind of believe that, there's a creator behind whatever we see. And, and I do believe that evolution occurred. I do believe dinosaurs. I believe in all of those things. I think they existed and all of that. And I believe that, God is going to be for everyone. I think that, I think there are sad things that occur and I think there are bad things that occur, but I think it's simply because God has allowed some very, I guess, and I know that the word devil was used, Satan was used in the book, but unholy, spirits. I think there are things that we can't see that are happening. There's those, realms of things that are taking place, a warfare, so to speak, spiritually, that we just can't see what's going on, but it exists. And I think, in people's hearts, there are people that have hearts that are completely closed off, and but I don't think God hates it. I just don't think, but
It's fine if you disagree. I respect your opinion on that. I just have to kindly disagree with you, just because if I was an all-knowing, all-loving being that could fix the wrongs in the world, I would do that. I would not allow children to be raped. I would not allow children to starve to death. I would not allow children to only know pain. I would not allow people to live in this world and only know pain. And that is just me as a person that tries to love and accept And if I had followers on this earth who were putting children through the things that Luca had to go through in my name, I would tell those followers to stop. But he does nothing. If there is a God, he just likes to sit there and watch. And I don't agree with that. And if that God is real, I don't want to be anywhere near him. He is not the kind of person I want to be around. He is not the kind of being I want to be around. That's my personal opinion. I am a good person. I try to do good things. I put good things into the world. But I don't want to go to a heaven that will damn me just because I didn't believe in something. And I think that a lot of God's creation can just be, it can be scientifically explained. And then you mentioned driving past a field with flowers, but that field probably has seen bloodshed. That field has probably seen some really terrible things that's taken place on it. And pretending that that field is beautiful and only knows beauty because God created it is privilege. So that's my opinion on it, and I'm not trying to convert anyone in here. My books were not trying to convert anyone to be an atheist. I would just really wanted to highlight some of the terrible things that occur every single day in the name of a loving God.
Yeah. And those are all good questions, and I think it's good to question things, because I think the more we question things, the more we find answers to those questions.
I agree.
So I think it's always good to question and to find out. And your covers, do you want to show the covers? Your book covers are very, very well done, and they're very attractive.
There's the first one. So I'll talk a little bit about each of them. So I had a friend who offered to draw the covers for me. So this is original artwork. Her name is Bibi. She's lovely. This one's Born in Sickness. It's the first one in the series. We talked about concepts. This was the second concept I came up with. I saw a picture online of a guy who had his makeup done similarly to this, and I thought of that, and she said, yeah, I can do that. She sent me it, and then she had another friend that was able to put it together, and then we brought the tiers along to the back. So that's the first one. And then the second one is right here. There's a common theme throughout all of them. There's a rainbow element, and typically that rainbow element comes from inside. So the first one was tears, and then this one is veins. So the concept of the heart, I think this one was the third one we came up with. This one's sweetness and innocence. And on here, there's a little detail of a lock with a cross on it, because there is a common metaphor that goes throughout the book that religion was kind of used as a cage, and Luca finally felt like he was free. So the heart is a literal cage, and then the lock is a little cross. And then inside of the cage is the veins, which are rainbow. So it's very symbolic in that way. And then the back goes on with the veins. The third book is my favorite cover, but it can be triggering, so trigger warning to anyone who may have self-harmed in the past. But it's my favorite because of that. It's just very beautiful to me. It's this one. It's called Paradise and Death. If the cover triggers you, probably shouldn't read the book, because the book is really going to trigger you. I think you would be able to attest to that. There's a very graphic scenes in this book that would trigger somebody. So originally, this was the first one I came up with, the scars being rainbow. And then this scar actually started off as rainbow, but it looked like I had to make it black and then just keep the rest of the scars rainbow. But this one's Paradise and Death, and it is literally my favorite. It's the first one that I came up with.
Your friend drew each one of these covers.
Yes.
And so, okay. Did she give you those covers like for artwork in your home also?
No, she just gave, I have a copy of all of them, but she gave them to me to use in whatever way I wanted. But I mostly just keep it for book covers. I wouldn't mind hanging them up. That's a really good idea because they're quite beautiful. And then the last one was the hardest one to come up with, the hardest concept. We went back and forth a lot because I just couldn't decide. But it is a boy who is very thin. This is Gentleness and Sin. This is actually Luca. And all the handprints on them represent the people who touched him in camp. And then, of course, the rainbow handprint over his heart symbolizes Harlan's handprint and how it, imprinted over his heart. And then this was, like I said, is the last one. And then the back has fingerprints on it. And then each cover gets lighter and lighter. And then there's a little church on the side. And the church gets darker and darker to symbolize losing faith.